The air inside the corporate boardroom was heavy with the quiet tension of a historic surrender. It was the year 2024, and the members of the Southwest Airlines board of directors sat in silence, staring at the presentation slides that marked the end of an era. Through the large glass windows of the Dallas headquarters, the relentless Texas sun beat down on the tarmac below, where hundreds of blue and gold jets sat waiting. Inside, the quiet rustle of paper and the soft hum of the air conditioner were the only sounds. For over 5 decades, this room had been a sanctuary for a rebellious philosophy. But today, the relentless pressure from Elliott Investment Management, a powerful Wall Street activist hedge fund, had finally broken their defenses. The decision was made. The legendary open seating policy, the very soul of the airline, was officially dead. To the outside world, it looked like a simple operational adjustment. But to those inside, it felt like a betrayal of everything they had built. It was a staggering, almost unbelievable turn of events. The airline that had conquered the global aviation market by stubbornly refusing to assign seats was now preparing to spend billions of dollars to do the exact opposite. They were going to tear apart their cabins, install premium seating zones, and implement assigned rows. For decades, competitors had laughed at their boarding process, calling it a cattle call. Yet Southwest had laughed last, building the most consistently profitable airline in history. Now, they were paying billions to copy the exact legacy carriers they had spent 50 years defeating. This leaves us with a haunting question. How did the most successful, culturally unique airline in aviation history get cornered into destroying its own sacred DNA? How did a company built on the fierce, rebellious vision of co-founder Herb Kelleher lose its way so completely that it surrendered its identity to a group of Wall Street investors? Kelleher, with his famous wild laugh and his absolute devotion to the common passenger, had built an empire of joy and efficiency. He believed that flying should not be a luxury reserved for the wealthy, but a simple, accessible freedom for everyone. The answer to their current crisis does not lie in a sudden moment of weakness. It lies in a brilliant system created decades ago, a system where a single tiny operational detail laid the foundation for both their legendary rise and their eventual trap. To understand this, we must travel back to the early 1970s. Southwest was a tiny, struggling carrier fighting for its life against massive legacy competitors who wanted to put them out of business. They were down to just 3 airplanes, but they had a schedule that required 4. They could not afford to buy another aircraft, and they could not afford to fail. It was in this moment of desperation that Herb Kelleher and his team looked at the physical reality of aviation. An airplane only makes money when it is flying in the air, not when it is sitting at the gate. This realization birthed the legendary 10-minute turnaround. The goal was simple, yet incredibly difficult. A Southwest plane had to land, deplane its passengers, clean the cabin, board a new group, and push back from the gate in exactly 10 minutes. To achieve this, every single second had to be optimized. The airline rejected the traditional hub-and-spoke system used by major competitors, where planes waited for connecting flights at massive central hubs. Instead, Southwest championed a point-to-point network, flying directly between smaller cities. But the ultimate bottleneck to the 10-minute turnaround was the physical process of boarding the passengers. This is where the open seating policy was born. By removing assigned seats entirely, Southwest created a powerful psychological incentive. Passengers knew that if they arrived early, they could choose the best seats. They boarded the plane with urgency, finding their places much faster than they would have on any traditional airline. This operational choice had massive consequences. Faster boarding minimized the time planes spent on the ground, which maximized aircraft utilization. Because their planes were flying more hours every day, Southwest could spread its fixed costs over more flights, allowing them to offer incredibly low ticket prices. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. But this brilliant strategy contained a hidden vulnerability. The very simplicity that made Southwest immune to standard industry crises created an invisible trap. By optimizing their entire universe purely for speed and operational simplicity, the airline chose to ignore massive shifts in consumer behavior and booking technology. For decades, they believed their customers only cared about low prices and friendly service. But as the 1990s turned into the new millennium, the world began to change. Travelers started to demand more control, premium options, and advanced digital experiences. By sticking stubbornly to their 70s playbook, Southwest was unknowingly building a fragile empire. The clock was ticking toward an unprecedented system-wide collapse, and the very system designed to keep them agile was about to lock them in a death grip. As the late 20th century gave way to the early 2000s, Southwest Airlines was no longer the scrappy underdog from Texas. It had transformed into a commercial colossus, carrying more domestic passengers than any other carrier in the United States. Year after year, the airline reported record-breaking profits while its legacy competitors fell into bankruptcies. Yet, even as its fleet grew to hundreds of Boeing 737 aircraft, the corporate culture remained stubbornly defiant. They still refused to charge for checked bags. They still did not assign seats. And they still treated their operational model as a sacred text. On the surface, the machine seemed unstoppable. But beneath the shiny blue and gold paint, the structural tension was mounting. The very size of the airline was beginning to strain the limits of its unconventional system. The competitive landscape was shifting beneath their feet. The legacy competitors, tired of losing market share, began to rewrite the rules of airline economics. They unbundled their services, introducing basic economy fares to match Southwest on price, while simultaneously building massive profit centers out of premium seating, extra legroom upgrades, and highly sophisticated loyalty programs. These airlines were turning their cabins into digital real estate, maximizing every square inch for revenue. Wall Street watched in fascination as these new revenue streams generated billions of dollars in pure profit. Yet, Southwest stubbornly refused to play the game. The leadership team, deeply committed to the legacy of Herb Kelleher, believed that their simple egalitarian model would always win the hearts of passengers. They believed that customer loyalty, forged in the fires of friendly service and free bags, was an impenetrable shield. But this blinded them to a harsh financial reality. By refusing to adapt, they were leaving billions of dollars on the table, and their cost advantage was slowly evaporating. The core of their operational philosophy was the point-to-point network. Unlike legacy competitors who routed everything through major central hubs, Southwest aircraft flew from city to city in a continuous, complex web. While this minimized passenger layovers, it created an incredibly complex scheduling puzzle. When a single flight was delayed, it could trigger a domino effect across the entire country. To manage this massive, interconnected web, the airline relied on a centralized scheduling software that had been designed decades earlier. As Southwest grew into a giant, the technology simply could not keep up. Engineers and industry experts warned that the system was fragile, that it lacked the modern automated capabilities to track crews in real time during a major disruption. But leadership, focused on keeping operational costs low, repeatedly postponed major information technology upgrades, prioritizing simplicity over technological modernization. They were running a 21st century empire on 20th century software. The day of reckoning arrived in December of 2022, during the busiest travel week of the holiday season. A massive winter storm swept across the United States, bringing freezing temperatures and heavy snow. Every airline suffered delays, but while legacy competitors managed to recover within a day or two, the Southwest network completely collapsed. The severe weather disrupted flight schedules, and because the point-to-point system had crews and planes scattered across hundreds of different cities, The internal scheduling software was instantly overwhelmed. The technology simply lost track of where its pilots and flight attendants were. The system could not match available crews with available aircraft, and the phone lines for employees to report their locations were jammed for hours. The result was an unprecedented operational catastrophe. Over the course of several days, Southwest was forced to cancel more than 16,000 flights, leaving millions of passengers stranded in crowded airport terminals during the holidays. Families slept on cold terminal floors, baggage mountains piled up in baggage claims across the nation, and desperate travelers spent days trying to find alternative ways home. The airline that had built its entire brand on the concept of love, a word so central to their identity that it was even their stock ticker symbol, was now the face of corporate failure. They had prioritized operational simplicity over modern software infrastructure, and the consequence was a historic $1 billion brand collapse. The ultimate inversion was complete. The company that prided itself on loving its passengers had left millions of them abandoned and forgotten on terminal floors. This collapse shattered the illusion of Southwest's operational superiority. The company was exposed as technologically backward and structurally vulnerable. In the cold, calculating offices of Wall Street, the smell of blood was in the air. The long-held belief that Southwest was untouchable had vanished overnight. It was in this moment of vulnerability that the final threat emerged. Elliott Investment Management, a powerful Wall Street activist hedge fund known for its aggressive tactics, saw an opportunity. They quietly began purchasing a massive stake in the company, eventually securing billions of dollars in Southwest stock. With this leverage, the activist fund launched a ferocious public campaign against the airline's leadership. They demanded the immediate removal of the chief executive officer and the board of directors. They accused the company of failing to modernize, of coddling underperforming systems, and of letting its countercultural legacy get in the way of financial performance. Elliott Investment Management demanded a total overhaul of the business model, insisting that the airline finally abandon its sacred founding principles, including the open seating policy. The battle lines were drawn, and the very soul of the airline was on the chopping block, setting the stage for a dramatic corporate showdown. Under the immense weight of Wall Street pressure, the fortress of Southwest exceptionalism finally cracked. The board of directors, facing an existential proxy fight against Elliott Investment Management, chose survival over tradition. In a series of quiet, historic announcements, the airline capitulated to the demands of the activist fund. The corporate officers stood before the public and officially declared the end of the egalitarian era. They announced that the legendary open seating policy was dead. In its place, the airline would introduce assigned seating, designated extra legroom premium tiers, and overnight red-eye flights. To the casual observer, it seemed like a standard business pivot, a necessary evolution to appease disgruntled investors. But to those who understood the delicate machinery of the aviation industry, it was a profound ideological surrender. Southwest was officially dismantling the temple that Herb Kelleher had built. This decision was not just a change in policy, it was a physical deconstruction of a legendary operational dream. The transformation required a massive, multi-billion-dollar redesign of hundreds of Boeing 737 aircraft. Technicians had to pull these planes into maintenance hangars to tear out the interiors. To create the new premium seating tiers with extra legroom, workers had to remove entire rows of standard seats, reducing the overall capacity of each aircraft. They had to install heavier, more complex seating structures and cabin dividers. Every additional pound of weight meant more fuel burned, and every removed seat meant fewer tickets to sell at the lowest price points. More importantly, the physical change immediately shattered the magic of the quick turnaround. Assigned seating meant passengers would now search for their specific rows, struggle with carry-on bags in designated zones, and slow the boarding process to a crawl. The elegant, Self-organizing chaos of open seating was replaced by the familiar, sluggish lines of every other legacy carrier. By capitulating to these demands, Southwest was forced to become the very thing it had spent more than 50 years fighting against. The airline had built its entire empire on being the anti-establishment alternative, a rebellious disruptor that laughed at the complex, expensive, and stressful systems of the traditional hub-and-spoke carriers. Now, it was adopting their exact playbook. They were introducing different cabin classes, charging premium prices for basic human comfort, and complicating their booking systems. The unique operational identity that had protected them from every economic downturn since the 1970s was being erased. They were entering a battlefield where their competitors had decades of experience. The giant of low-cost aviation was voluntarily laying down its shield, stepping into the arena as just another standard legacy airline, stripped of its countercultural armor. This transition exposes a brutal financial paradox. The hard fact is that Southwest adopted assigned seating and premium tiers to capture higher revenue from business travelers and wealthier passengers. The direct consequence of this choice is that boarding times will inevitably slow down, which increases the time aircraft spend sitting idle at the gate. Here lies the tragic inversion. By trying to save their profit margins through premium fees, they are systematically erasing the historic asset utilization advantage that made them profitable in the first place. The fast turnaround was the engine of their low-cost structure. When planes sit on the ground, they do not make money. By slowing down the machine to chase a few extra dollars per seat, they are driving up their overall operational costs, making it harder to offer the low fares that defined their brand. This reveals the ultimate tragedy of corporate maturity. A company survives its youth by breaking the rules of the system, but as it grows into a massive empire, it becomes too large to ignore the gravity of the market, eventually dying when it conforms to the very rules it once shattered. In the end, we are left with a quiet, philosophical truth. The original disruption created by Kelleher was never truly about airplanes, fuel hedges, or point-to-point networks. It was a deep, psychological insight into human nature, built on the belief that travel could be simple, egalitarian, and filled with dignity. He proved that you could run a highly successful business by treating passengers as equals and keeping things beautifully simple. When an empire decides to trade its core identity for a temporary bump in its stock price, it does not just modify its strategy, it loses its fundamental purpose. As the new, multi-class Southwest planes push back from the gates, they carry more than just assigned passengers. They carry the quiet weight of a lost philosophy, proving that in the modern corporate world, even the most beautiful rebels eventually grow up, conform, and blend into the gray horizon.